a newspaper, TV, talking to your neighbour over the fence, people in conversation, or they can be part of a physical setting. It could be signage, floor decals, the supermarket layouts, very influential in how you go about your grocery shopping. So when we're thinking about cat containment, these are some of the potential drivers, barriers, and touch points. And this is not meant to be an exhaustive list of everything, and this is not applicable to every single cat companion. This is just indicative of some things that might be out there. So for the drivers, I think it might be easy, think it's best for your cat, think it's good for them as cat companions, get to spend more time with your cat if they're closer to you, thinking it's the socially accepted normal behaviour, and having sort of a service to help you implement that. So the barriers, thinking it's unachievable, welfare concerns, thinking that it's not a problem, they're not a risk, they don't roam far, or that it might be a good thing for predating on rats and mice. And there's various touch points, social media, vets, conservation community groups, and many more. The important thing is that successful interventions overcome those barriers and reinforce the drivers, and they're served to the audience through these different touch points. So now we'll have a look at some examples and some case studies of this in practice. So this is an example of two flyers that were shown to people in a study by Doc a couple of years ago. The one on the left, I'm not sure if you can read the words on there, but pretty much it was from a vet advocating for keeping the cats at home at night, and the one on the right is a little girl, 7 years old, about enjoying having Fluffy sleeping on her bed at night. And there was also a third sort of control neutral pamphlet that was just very factual. People were shown. And it found that these two, the vet and the child, were more impactful than the neutral at getting people to want to keep their cats inside at night. And so what we could call this is a messenger effect. So it matters who's telling the message to the people who are receiving it. Another one was a study by McLeod et al., who did a messaging trial. What they did is they did a survey of people on cat management behaviours and their relationships with their cats. And then they showed people one of 3 videos about cat containment, and they were randomly allocated one of the videos they were going to see, and then immediately after seeing that video, they were surveyed on the topic of cat containment. These are some of the videos shown, and they're on YouTube if you want to have a look at them. There was one that was very neutral and factual, not much emotion in that one. There was one that really stressed the benefit to the cats of being at home, and there was one that talked about wildlife protection. And what they found is that the people who had been shown either the cat benefit or the wildlife protection video were more likely than the people who were shown the neutral one to be motivated to keep their cat contained and believed that they could keep their cat contained. And further to that, they found there was a relationship between that motivation and the belief that they could keep their cat contained and a real intention to implement some cat containment solutions and adopt a contained cat lifestyle. They also found that the cat benefit video resonated better with cat owners that reported having a really strong bond with their pets, more so than the wildlife video. And so this research recommended segmenting the audience to deliver really targeted messages to different types of people. So that's a bit of theory. Let's see what that means when we try and do this in practice. You are not your audience. I think this is a really critical point, and if you take just one thing away today, I would like it to be that you are not necessarily your audience. And if you remember that adoption curve that Imogen talked about, a lot of you might be at that beginning innovator part of the curve. So you might be in a different part of the journey to some of the people that you're talking with. So really successful communication has the target audience at the top of your mind, and you might not have one target audience. You might have a couple of them that you want to talk to in slightly different ways. And this might change over time, it might change over location. There's a lot of different variables you might want to consider. And so your audience is likely to have different values or knowledge or experiences to you. So that's something just to keep in mind. And we'd encourage you to make effort to get to know your audience, find out what matters to them, what's important to them, and try and find some common ground to build a foundational relationship with them. So at the beginning of our presentation, we talked a little bit about ourselves and our cats and our experiences, to find some common ground with you, some things that we might have in common. This is a study in the UK, and they looked at some different attitudes of cat owners, and they found that they could sort of categorize human cat companions into 5 groups. And the details of this are not too important. The important bit is that there's just a lot of diversity. They're not a homogenous group of human cat companions. Something else to keep in mind with particularly printed or communications is that the image choices you use can be quite important. So here's an image, and we've got a couple more that will pop up on the screen. What sort of adjectives might you use to describe the cat that you can see in this picture here? Just shout some words out.
Happy.
Say that again.
Happy.
Happy, yeah, happy cat.
Beautiful cat.
Beautiful cat.
Yeah. Hold both those
Okay,
two.
cool. All right.
Yeah.
How about this one? It's a cute cat.
Playful.
Playful cat. Anything else come to mind? Playful, yeah. What about this one? Oh, I can hear. Oh, yes. Oh, lovely cat. What about this one? Restful, yeah. Calm, content.
In
yeah.
charge.
In charge. What about this cat?
On the prowl.
On the prowl, yeah. Yeah. And lucky last image. What does this one might say to
Cat's
you?
in trouble.
It's in trouble.
Such a
Yeah.
nice cat face.
Howling. Such claws out, ready to go. Yeah, so this is just something to keep in mind that images are not neutral. They say something as well. So just make sure that the image choices align with the textual message that you're trying to give. And here's some helpful ways that we could frame our message to cat owners. Go about acknowledging that owners love their cats. We've seen before, we've got cat companions here. So as an example from Forest and Bird, it says Forest and Bird recognises the important role cats play in New Zealand society. Cats provide companionship and offer other positive benefits. Many Forest and Bird members own their cats, building that common ground relationship with the audience. A collective story and norms. As a responsible cat owner, you should desect your cat. This is what we do as a collective group. We desect our cats. Using emotion. This is an example about feral cats. We believe some of those cats have been deliberately dumped and turned feral, which is distressing and an issue in itself because dumped cats rarely survive long term. Makes us feel for those cats. Agency and making a difference. Dean research found placing bells on cats halved the number of birds caught. Domestic cats are predators we have direct control over, so being a responsible cat owner, we can make a real difference. That's showing that we can do it. You have the agency to do it. And focusing on the solution. So rather than getting distracted with any problem at hand, just focusing on what we really want people to do. Make your cat conservation friendly. There's a quiz with Doc listing different actions that responsible cat owners could take. And another one was Imogen recently found. was about amplifying good news stories. If you find some good news stories, share it. In this article on Stuff, a family moved from Auckland to Invercargill shortly after their cat Smokey had gone missing, and the new tenants to their home, Smokey had returned, and they found Smokey, and they took Smokey to the SPCA where they were microchipped and then happily returned to their family in Invercargill. And for a little contrast, some of the less helpful cat owner messaging to avoid, reinforcing what is natural for cats to do. Cats hunt, and unfortunately their prey sometimes includes native wildlife. Better just to not mention that. Focusing on the problem more than the solution. Cats, are they pests? This highlights what we don't want. Good for business. A change in attitude could potentially benefit cats, wildlife and business entrepreneurs. Overseas, the business of cats is a lucrative one. For all of our primary audience, business is not at the top of their mind. They're thinking about their cats as their companions, part of their family, so it just doesn't appeal too much. Pro versus anti-cat and negation. We're not anti-cat, we're just concerned about protecting bird life on our mama. So mentioning the term anti-cat just daylights that someone thinks that they were anti-cat, and so it puts a bit of doubt and question in the audience's mind when they come across something like this. And just in general, the pro versus anti-cat dichotomy isn't helpful to achieve our common goals. And hedging. Traps, not cats, are likely to be needed to catch the biggest Norway rats. Hedging is using sort of vague terms that are not definitive and
The sorts of things
cause
scientists like to do.
So there's suggested that just saying traps, not cats, are needed to catch the biggest Norway rats. Getting rid of that "are likely" makes it firmer and less ambiguous. And coming soon to you are some more resources. We've got a communications toolkit and guidelines, and Predator Free New Zealand has a messaging guide specifically about talking with cat companions. And these are going to be going on to Te Aki Tamaki Makoto. Has anyone visited that? Does anyone know what this is? Oh, that's exciting. Te Aki Tamaki Makoto is Auckland Council's new conservation website with lots of great resources like this and many others for you. So that's pretty much us. Any questions? Yes.
A couple of ones, probably for you, Imogen. The barriers to de-sexing, and you mentioned cost. I just know that one of the barriers to getting kids vaccinated is actually time. Have you had a look at that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think cost in not just monetary terms,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And so this is thing one for us is to help people with some of this communication stuff, but we're also doing some work to look at how can we facilitate access to de-sexing, particularly in those priority places. And yeah, I think it is more about more than just money.
Yeah. And you mentioned fencing properties for cats. That's what I'm curious about because we don't have cats at the moment. Not going to. But in terms of, I've seen cats jump. So what's the actual?
So you can get, and so you can either, there's the whole spectrum, right, from the DIY, but it might not look that amazing, but easy to do, through to the palatial mansion fancy commercial version. You essentially, you can add to the top of an existing fence. It's like, the DIY version is essentially a piece of dowel with a downpipe type. So it's this concept of, there's this spinning thing on the top, and so they jump up, they can't get purchased.
Oh, they did the pratfall videos, that's fantastic.
but there are commercial products that will do that for, that you top your fence with. But there's also, so in, is it Canada? Somewhere in North America, they've got this, it's become a thing in their community, and they do, instead of sort of garden show tours, they do my contained cat show tours where they're all upping each other for how awesome a cat containment system they've got in their backyards. And actually I saw one on Twitter from Wellington, I think, recently, which had this amazing kind of, so it's not your entire property, right, but they had a, like some kind of fence thing that came out from their deck that was elevated off the ground, and then it came down to this sort of thing that looked a bit like a lighthouse or something in their garden that was like how you might have an aviary out the back for birds, and it allowed the cat to seamlessly run between the house and something in the garden. So they're an amazing, you Google it, there's some incredible options that, and I think this is the stuff that one of the barriers is that we don't even know this stuff exists. So, yeah. Megan,
I was just going to say, make a comment. I think they're not huge in New Zealand because a lot of those countries in Australia have got predator animals, so you want to keep your cat in so they don't get taken by a snake or a iguana or something like that in Australia, or mountain, whatever.
Yeah.
So
I think you're
probably
absolutely
why they haven't.
You're right. We're on the back foot, and so I guess that's the road kill. We're two of the cats on that slide before of my old cats were killed because we moved to a near a main road and they got killed. You know, so that is a real issue. But, Robert?
I was going to say something that others may or may not have heard of. I came out west about 19 years ago, brought my 2 cats with me, and they were outside a little bit, but then they passed away and I sank the lid. But what I do is I have a form of almost vicarious and virtual cat ownership. I go online. This has just happened over the last couple of years onto YouTube, and I've got nice, cute cats sleeping with owners, and also nice, happy ending ones where the cats have been rescued and so on. Now, that's existing cats, but it means in an area where I am in Tarangi, I'm getting my cat fix, but without real endangerment.
A concept that was new to me until earlier this year is petfluencers. Did you know there is such a thing? Petfluencers, it's a big thing on the internet. Cats with little bow ties and mittens in Wellington. Mittens is definitely a petfluencer. Difficult, we've talked about how can we have a petfluencer in Auckland who rivals mittens. The problem is that mittens is exhibiting precisely the behaviour we don't actually want to encourage, but by dint of that is very relatable. You know, lots of people can connect to mittens. So how do we find a mittens who stays at home and yet people are still connected to them?
So just this one last question. The Ruffles versus the bells.
So I think evidence suggests that it depends on what species you're trying to protect. So the bell might work better for some than others, but the ruffled collar, particularly if it's bright colours, so particularly red and yellow, things that are easily visible to birds, because you know they're thinking about the kōwhai flower or the kōwhiti flower. They see that and they see that movement. And when you think about intuitively, if a cat's wearing a bell, but the cat's doing very slow stalking, a bird doesn't, that bell's having no effect, right, until the point where it's too late. Whereas the collar is quite visually evident. And so the evidence suggests the collar the fluffy collar is more effective. So, and again, the barrier is that most people haven't figured it.
So you do one last one?
Okay.
This whole thing about normalising behaviour, like you see things become normalised, this seems to me something which just seems so difficult to do, and you've got all these wonderful messages, and I'm wondering what ideas you've got for groups like ours. How can we start to normalise this conversation without the emotional response? Because I'm too scared to go on social media and say anything anti-cat because you just get slammed. What other methods have we got? You know, how can we, and particularly coming from pest-free PR, we will go, oh yes, don't like cats. You know. What can we do?
That is the question, right? That is the crux of it all. I think what we're trying to go for is it's the conversation where you're saying to your neighbours or whoever, trying to make the words up on the spot, but you know, it's using these kind of things in this presentation where you're talking about, I love my cat and it's great when it stays at home, or you know, I have this agency that I can keep it at home. You know, or did you know that there are products where you can keep your cat contained in the same way that we do for dogs? You know, and we've made that. We've managed to have this whole societal transition for dogs, so we can do it. You know, so we can do it with cats. But I think anything where you say anti-cat or anything that's negative, and I know this, I mean, I'm presiding over the most monumental cat PR disaster in the country, probably, of having called cats pest cats in our regional pest management plan, which is factually correct because under the biosecurity they are pests, right, but totally unhelpful. So, you know, just steer well away from any of that kind of